Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. How are we getting on? Welcome to a brand new Starfield video. So, a couple of days ago, Bethesda released a new deep dive into the upcoming Shattered Space expansion, and there's some kind of fun stuff there. So we're going to take a little look at some of the bits and pieces in that, have a little chatter about what we think might sort of be implied by that, what we might expect to see in the expansion when it drops very, very soon. So, yeah, new dev dive. It's up on Bethesda's YouTube channel. I'll make sure I link it down below if you haven't seen it. There's some really cool details in there. The whole thing's about 10 minutes long, and interestingly tells us both quite a lot and not very much at the same time, which is probably really where we want it, given, you know, who wants spoilers. Speaking of, going to reference some stuff that happens in the main game, going to reference some little snippets of information, obviously, from the deep dive here. So, very light touch spoilers here and there. Here's an FYI fair warning for you and all that. Yeah, looking forward to this one. It's coming out on the 30th of September, so that's less than 2 weeks away. Monday week as we sit here. But yeah, looking forward to. Definitely going to have to chase down some progress, so I'm ready for it. But we've got a whole bunch of new information that's sort of confirmed, nailed down a few extra details about the setting and the situation, and sort of what we're going into, which is cool. So we knew from existing lore that the homeworld of House of RUUN is RUUN. We knew that the capital city was also referenced in a number of bits of lore, particularly in the embassy in New Atlantis. That's called Darth, gets referenced in there. And we now have a system for it as well, which is interesting. It's in the Kavnik system, which you probably won't find until the expansion actually enters the game, because it's supposed to be a hidden system. Nobody knows where it is. Even Andresia, whose background is in that direction, she doesn't know where our homeworld is either. And it's the whole thing with House of RUUN secrecy, which kind of is going to raise a couple of questions further on down the line as to where information is coming from. But yeah, it's going to make for an interesting situation. So one of the cool details about this, obviously the lead-in to the expansion starts elsewhere in the settled systems, but it takes you on fairly rapidly to RUUN, the homeworld of House of RUUN. One of the cool things in this dev dive was that once you're there, the story doesn't leave. You can, as a player, get up, you can pack up and go wherever you want after that and come back later if you so desire, but the story itself stays on the planet. So that's an interesting turn of events. Most of the quests and storylines, anything remotely major, has your planet hopping in the rest of the base game. So this expansion being focused is interesting. They've talked about it being handcrafted and more so compared to a lot of the other stuff. So obviously the major cities and stuff in base Starfield are handcrafted, and that will be the same with Darth. But they're expanding that out to larger areas of the planet of RUUN, which is going to make for an interesting and hopefully detailed and really cool place to explore. And I'll keep throwing up some appropriate footage for you so you can have a look. But yeah, this looks particularly striking, and one thing that struck me from the beginning of Starfield and right the way through playing it is that if Bethesda got one thing right, and they got more than one thing right, but if there's one thing they got right, it's the environments. They are really, really cool. It doesn't matter whether they're like open planets or moons or internals of space stations and spaceships. Occasionally scale was a bit of an issue, but yeah, like the atmosphere and the design and the look and the lighting and all that stuff was just really, really cool. And there's so many bits in there that I've got stacks of screenshots of, because the environments are so cool. And yeah, very, very impressive. And it looks like that theme is definitely continuing with RUUN, which they have clearly been working on for a hot minute. It also looks like they're going to build on a number of the things that are in previous updates. So obviously you've got like the Rev 8, the new vehicle, that's going to be usable on their planet, and to a certain extent anyway, because driving it in cities is probably never a good idea. And that will likely hold true here. But they're also talking about sort of closer, more confined environments in some ways, so probably won't be as usable there, but when you're travelling between those environments, that'll be great. But yeah, there's a number of other little bits and pieces they've done. So one of the things I'm really interested in, that's going to tie into combat we'll talk about in a minute, is how things like the customizability of the difficulty system is going to affect this, and also how this is going to work in terms of what level is recommended for it. Usually with Bethesda's expansions, DLCs, things like that, certainly in Fallout and Elder Scrolls and stuff, you usually start seeing stuff kicking in about level 20, and you're okay to go, and some of the stuff might be higher level than that, and I have a sneaking suspicion that it will probably be similar here. So, we'll be arriving on RUUN in the aftermath of a fairly catastrophic event. So, we know this is going to be called the Vortex Incident, And it basically involved using grav drive technology to achieve something. The whole quest for knowledge thing that is the foundation of the Starfield experience was referenced here. But yeah, we know this experiment went wrong and has in some way broken down the barriers between our reality and the Vortex, which other IPs might refer to as the Void. It sounds like this is the space between realities, because, slight spoiler here, but you know, there's the transition to exploring new alternate dimensions and realities that comes in with the later stages of the main story. I'm guessing this is kind of poking your head around the corner to what's in between those spaces, you know? I certainly seem to get that tone. Obviously, when we dive in, we'll find out more, but that seems to be the vibe. The upshot of this is that a large chunk of the city was consumed by it. There's a big old crater in the middle of town, and a number of space-time distortions and anomalies have affected parts of the city and presumably beyond as well. So we've got people missing. The main leadership of House RUUN are trapped within some kind of anomaly. The whole kind of, I believe they said it was called the Scaled Citadel, that is the seat of power for House RUUN. That's trapped in some kind of anomaly, as are the leaders of House RUUN overall. And we've got the survivors there who are just kind of kicking around in the damaged city, still trying to recover, still trying to find missing people, and they've barely even started to do any sort of damage repairs or anything like that because their crisis is kind of ongoing as we arrive, and has been for a little while. That's the kind of situation we're dropping into, and obviously you find individual people who are dealing with small-scale problems, like where is this family member who has gone missing as a result of this situation? And then you've got other stuff like the minor houses and factions within the larger House RUUN faction, who are obviously seeking to take advantage of the chaos to gain themselves a little bit more power. I suspect we'll be dealing with a potential coup at some point, but that's just a guess at this point. Logical, though, given the situation. So an interesting thing about this whole scenario that they haven't answered, but I want to know, is that how does this tie in to the existing House RUUN lore? Clearly it will answer that in the expansion, but for now, prior to its coming out, it's just a big old question mark. But yeah, what we know is that the colony ship left apparently Mars, according to something they posted recently on socials, but it was previously listed as being New Atlantis, so there's a little bit of a lore conflict there, I think. So we'll see how that pans out. But yeah, we know the colony ship left, I think it was called the Archimedes, and during one of its extended grav jumps, Xion Varun, who is the founder of House RUUN and its first leader, had a experience where he claimed to meet a celestial being called the Great Serpent, foundation of House RUUN. Thing is, as far as I'm aware, since that time, nobody else has ever actually encountered this Great Serpent, which is certainly consistent with a lot of real-world religious setups. You know, a few individuals claim to have communicated with whatever godhead it might be, and others just follow that and take it on faith. And yeah, more cynical individuals like myself step back and go, really? Did you now? Or were you just tripping? So, we know that this happened during a grav jump, or he claimed it did. It seems likely that a subsequent grav drive experiment gone wrong may have been the new leadership's attempt to make contact with the being out there, the Great Serpent, possibly because it hasn't happened since. And went about as well as you can imagine that probably would go. So, yeah, it'd be interesting to see whether or not my guess there is correct and what the motivation for this is. And we know the leader of House RUUN is referred to as being the speaker for the Great Serpent. And, yeah, I wonder if he's speaking for something he's never had any contact with, if it exists at all. So it's going to be interesting to see how this pans out. It's the whole kind... There's almost certainly going to be a whole kind of cynicism versus faith angle to what's going on here. It'll be an interesting thing to look into. And there's also a big thing we find out in here. The phrase that keeps coming up throughout this div dive is, all must serve. And it's this whispered, creepy voice. And whose voice is it? Probably supposed to be the Great Serpent's. We don't really know. Is it just a hallucination? Again, we don't really know. But this concept of all must serve ties into, again, something that a lot of faiths have out there, which is the whole kind of ours is the one true religion angle. And it also explains why you have things like the Serpent's Crusade happening back in Starfield history. and things like the RUUN Zealots, who are the splinter group, who basically take the view that the Great Serpent will only return in the event that all non-believers are eliminated, which is a bit of an extremist view, to say the least. So, obviously, this is a big source of conflict, and when you're hearing this all must serve throughout this thing, it's going to be interesting to see whether or not maybe there's more moderate groups, maybe there are more extremist groups, who's going to decide the future of House RUUN, which is a reference that has been made in this as well. So it'll be very, very interesting to see if maybe that might factor into sort of the influence of the player in that scenario, you know? I think these elements will come together to be sort of part of the resolution in the story, which will be interesting to dive into. Obviously, a lot more nuance and details and stuff going on in there. That'll be sort of personal stories and group stories and stuff like that to dive into. So, I said we come back towards the combat angle of things as well, and there is a big shift in tone in this expansion. It's leaning more into the cosmic horror side of things. We've talked about in the past how space travel and space in general is dangerous. In this case, space is also scary AF as well. So they're kind of leaning into that horror element. You've got creepy, nasty insect-like creatures that can ambush from the void, the vortex rather, when you kind of disturb the barriers, things like that, and they're creepy-looking things. A lot of the native wildlife to Varunkai looks similarly nasty, and a lot of the vibe is enclosed spaces, close-up combat, whereas in the base game, there's a lot more long-range distance firefights. With Shattered Space, apparently, they've deliberately shortened the engagement distance, which is an interesting question. They have, in the run-up to this, in previous updates, increased the viability of a melee weapons build. Obviously, you can use unarmed combat as well. They've added more tiers and upgrades to melee weapons to make them more interesting. There are new melee weapons that we can see scattered here and there in this footage, and likely to see more going on, so that'll be cool. And there's also a question of things like shotguns. They're a bit not great, really, in the base game. They don't really have the range for the longer fights, and it means you have to close the distance while you're under fire. And especially if you've done what I've done and ranked up some of the difficulty, especially for combat, then you are likely to be turned into Swiss cheese on your way to trying to close the distance. So one generally tends to favour something that works at a longer distance. I actually did a pistol build for a while. It worked fine, but I wasn't really enjoying it, so I ended up respecing back to rifles, and that definitely feels better. But if they're swinging in the direction of close and personal, in-your-face attacks to kind of amp up the horror element and the fear element, it'll be interesting to see how these weapons start to be more useful again going forward. So yeah, along with this, obviously, we've seen the new enemy types, stuff like that. We've got wildlife on Varunkai that looks like it's not entirely dissimilar to some of the other stuff in the settled systems, which kind of makes a certain amount of sense, a certain amount of continuity. If they were completely wildly different, that would look weird. But we have got things like the Vortex horrors jumping out at us, which is going to be interesting. And a lot of the emphasis here does seem to be on changing up combat styles. So we see a couple of occasions where people jump on you in surprise, be that creatures or people. And we also see in the footage people try to close the distance, run up and use melee weapons and that sort of thing. So that's going to be interesting too. On a wider scale, talking about sort of combat and enemies and things like that, there is apparently a case that whilst larger areas of Varunkai had been settled, it looks like a lot of the House RUUN settlers have pulled back towards the capital city in Dazra, basically to protect themselves as everything is going down the pan. So the upshot of that is abandoned locations like settlements and outposts and things like that, which are available for the taking and apparently have therefore been occupied by groups like the Crimson Fleet, Spacers, and RUUN Zealots. So that kind of gives the opportunity to have additional sort of factional conflict going on and other parties being interested, because there's a big question here, but it kind of leads into an interesting kind of conclusion, I guess. And that is, how did they find the place if Varunkai is a hidden system? We're going to have a direct way to find it through basically an abandoned space station that's going to lead us in. We kind of know that a little bit already. The details are still obviously yet to be revealed, but we kind of have that sort of vaguely laid out already. How do the other factions find their way there, though? Probably not the same way we do. So that's a bit of an open question, but if there is some way in which the location has been made public, it would be understandable why these sort of maleficent kind of factions like the pirates and the spacers and the zealots would then want to kind of see what they can grab now that this place has been revealed. So their presence is not surprising. It's how they found out where it is in the first place that I'm curious about. And from a gameplay standpoint, it's obviously, these are some antagonistic factions. Let's have them present here as well, and it opens up the number of potential flies in the ointment and as well potential combat opportunities, so kind of expands what you can encounter in that situation. So I kind of see why it's there from a gameplay standpoint, but from a situational lore explaining how they got here situation, I am curious to find out more. So the last cool thing that I wanted to talk about from this situation is obviously we've got a lot of new cool items that are making an appearance. There's only a few that are really shown here. There are a handful of weapons that we saw. I think I spotted a heavy weapon that I don't think I recognise, and a couple of potential melee weapons. I suspect there's more than that as well. It won't be vast numbers, just a few bits and pieces that hopefully will be interesting. So there's some of that in there, but we don't really get to see a lot of it. We get to see a couple of new spacesuits. Some of them are just variations on existing House Varun spacesuits that we encounter on Varun Zealots, and they look quite cool. Definitely some interesting designs. We're also seeing some more out there designs. There was one with lots of kind of geometric sort of plates on it, almost like scales, and it had a big circle around the back of your neck. Not sure about that circle bit, but the design of the rest of the suit was pretty unique and cool, and I'm interested to get a closer look at that. And one thing we do see a lot more of here is updated versions and new variations on existing outfits, and of course new outfits as well, so clothing for our characters to wear. Hopefully we'll get our hands on a bunch of this. I'm looking forward to checking some of that stuff out as well. It should be very, very cool. So, yeah, that's all the stuff that I kind of picked up and wanted to chatter about and raise a few questions on regarding Shattered Space. I'm looking forward to jumping into that. As I say, it comes out on the 30th, and that is a Monday, so we'll definitely be diving in and checking out that expansion as soon as I possibly can. Very much excited for it. I've got a lot of prep to do, but so there's a few big questions. What were they really trying to do, and how much connection do House Varun have to their Great Serpent? Has anybody else ever spoken to this thing apart from Xion Varun? And if not, that would explain why they're trying to do experiments to make contact, as they are now on their third leader. So this will be the second one who hasn't had contact, assuming that Xion Varun never did and wasn't just tripping, of course. But yeah, the setting looks cool. The interfactional conflicts and stuff between sort of how far down the extreme route do you want to go with the faction, that sort of thing, and the player's role in that are going to open up some really cool role-playing opportunities, I think. So depending on what type of a character you want to play, that should be pretty interesting. The one I'm playing at the moment is actually somebody who has the Serpent's Embrace trait that I picked at the start, and the idea being that she once was a member of House Varun who in some way left and then started a new life outside of the faction. Still has some of the baggage from that, but she started a new life. And it'll be interesting to see how that kind of draws back around and goes back in with this expansion. So that should be fun. The prospect of exploring Varankai is looking very cool. Apart from just the general purple environments and stuff like that, the just additional gravimetric anomalies and stuff, we see a lot of zero-G stuff going on in the footage. That's going to add a whole new element, because that does exist in the base game, but it doesn't get used a vast amount, which is probably a good thing. But there's definitely some potential to do a bit more with it, so it's fun that that's going to be coming in here as well. I'm looking forward to sort of exploring more 3D movement, I suppose, rather than 2D, which should be good fun. Definitely looking forward to that. And yeah, lots of questions about the scenario and the lore, and finding out more about House Varun should be really cool. I'm guessing that this whole Vortex area, if it is the space between worlds or realities, might be where they allege the Great Serpent is in hibernation, because the whole idea of it, it created the galaxy and then decided to rest and will soon reawaken. It was kind of the premise of their faith. And it seems logical that if they broke down the barriers to the Vortex, that maybe they were trying to make contact with something inside the Vortex. Or maybe the whole thing was just a complete disaster from start to finish. Who knows? Be interesting to find out. But yeah, I'm looking forward to diving into this. There's a lot of interesting sci-fi horror potential here, as well as role-playing options and that sort of thing. Should be cool. So, thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed a little speculation and discussion around some of the cool stuff that Bethesda have recently shown us. If you do want to join me for the live streams, that should be kicking off on the 30th, rather, if I get the date right. So that'll be the 30th of September, it's a Monday, so around about 8 o'clock UK time. It should be fun. We'll definitely check that out. And yeah, in the meantime, we'll check out any other streams we're doing. Playing Fallout London, playing through the Stalker games at the moment. That's been good fun as well. And of course, 76 on the go as well. Loads of stuff to check out if you're interested. Always appreciate likes, subs, social media links, channel memberships, all that down below. If you want to hit those buttons as well, very, very much appreciate. Do a little gander. Much appreciated. So, for now, thank you very much for watching. I look forward to speaking to you all very, very soon.